Welcome to the Nepali Diaspora Network, your essential source for news, views, and insights for Nepalese worldwide. Today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, an extraordinary week that has truly left its mark on Nepal's modern history. It's fundamentally reshaped the political and social landscape. The week of September 8th, 2025, it's going to be remembered as a watershed moment, no doubt about it. What kicked off as this, digitally native, youth-led movement against corruption, against state censorship, it just escalated with breathtaking speed. In just a few days, we saw protests, terrible violence erupting way beyond Kathmandu, over 50 lives lost. It led to the dramatic collapse of the government and something really unprecedented, the dissolution of parliament itself. It was such a rapid shift, wasn't it? From online anger to street protests, then these deadly clashes, huge destruction, and finally the appointment of an interim government.
It really was. The scale, the sheer velocity of it all, it was astonishing. The nation went from this sort of simmering digital frustration to, well, a full-blown political earthquake in almost no time. It's a stark story, really, of how quickly public feeling can just coalesce and how fragile those existing power structures can be when faced with a truly mobilized population. So our mission today is to provide you, our listener, with a clear, chronological, and comprehensive summary of how these really pivotal events unfolded. We'll try to explore the key catalysts, what actually ignited the unrest. We'll look at the tragic turns the protests took, the huge political fallout, and, of course, the immense challenges that now lie ahead for Nepal, a nation really grappling with its future after such a tumultuous week.
Okay, let's unpack this. Beneath the surface of everyday life in Nepal, you're saying this deep frustration had been building for a while, like pressure building up. But every explosion needs a spark. And here, it seems there were two distinct catalysts that really ignited things, that pushed Nepal to its tipping point. Let's start with the one that began, like so many movements do now, online.
Exactly. The first, and maybe the one with deeper roots in the collective consciousness, was the viral #NepoBaby campaign. And this wasn't just, a fleeting internet trend or some simple meme. No, it was a powerful, really emotionally charged online movement. It acted almost like a lightning rod for all this resentment that had been simmering for so long. Young Nepalese across the country used this hashtag to expose and, well, to condemn the extravagant, often very flashy lifestyles of the children and relatives of influential political leaders. What's fascinating here is just how quickly it caught fire. It spread like wildfire across, the digital landscape. It gained immense traction, particularly on visual platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where, let's face it, images and short videos often speak much louder than carefully crafted statements.
Right, so it wasn't just about wealth existing, but the blatant display of it, flaunting privilege in a country where so many people were struggling.
Precisely. That flaunting, that almost boastful display was key. The campaign powerfully highlighted this stark, incredibly painful contrast. On one hand, the average Nepalese person earning about, USD 1,400 a year, struggling to make ends meet, and on the other hand, these Nepo kids openly displaying immense, often unearned wealth.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Oh, luxury cars, designer clothes worn casually, lavish parties documented constantly on social media, international holidays to exotic places, all of it starkly visible to a generation facing profound economic anxiety. This perception of impunity, wealth generated not through hard work but through political connections. It just created this incredibly fertile ground for outrage. The key insight, I think, is how the #NepoBaby campaign didn't just point out inequality, it actively personalized the systemic failures for a generation already feeling disenfranchised, economically trapped. It made abstract data points feel viscerally unfair.
Okay, I see. And was there any single moment or image that really crystallized this for people, something that turned that abstract resentment into a really tangible focus?
Absolutely. There was one prominent symbol of this disconnect that went viral, really ignited particular fury. It was the opulent wedding of Foreign Minister Arzarana Doba's daughter. Footage of these lavish events circulated widely. People were doing side-by-side comparisons, showing the extravagance right next to images of struggling families.
Wow.
But it wasn't just about that one wedding, though. It tapped into much deeper systemic issues. There's this widespread dissatisfaction over a struggling national economy, a severe lack of promising career prospects at home, and, of course, the significant brain drain, thousands of educated young Nepalese leaving the country every single day for jobs overseas.
That brain drain is huge, isn't it?
It's massive. If you zoom out for a moment, consider the broader economic context. Around 33% of Nepal's GDP comes from remittances sent back by these workers abroad. And at the same time, a staggering 20% of Nepalese youth are unemployed. So we have this mix of economic desperation at home and the blatant flaunting of wealth by the connected few. It just created this powerful sense of injustice that was basically ready to explode.
So a deep sense of injustice simmering, festering online, amplified by these really potent images of disparity.
Okay.
And then came the immediate trigger, the thing that pushed everything from online discussion, from resentment, into the physical streets. What was that tipping point?
That trigger, the immediate spark, was the government's highly controversial decision on September 7th to ban 26 widely used social media platforms. This is a truly sweeping move, unprecedented, really.
26 platforms, which ones?
We're talking the giants.
Yeah.
Facebook, formerly Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Signal, Snapchat, Instagram. Essentially the digital lifeline for millions of Nepalese.
Why did they do it? What was the official reason?
Well, the government cited a new law. It required local registration and compliance with national regulations. They were also hoping to enforce a digital services tax, to boost state revenue. However, for young Nepalese, and they are a huge demographic, the median age is just 25, very high social media use, almost one account for every two people. This ban was perceived as something else entirely.
As censorship.
Exactly. As a blatant authoritarian act of political censorship. It wasn't just about losing entertainment. These platforms were essential for their daily communication, for small businesses doing commerce, for their very expression and organization. This wasn't just an inconvenience. For them, it felt like a fundamental assault on their digital rights, on their economic livelihoods, too.
And the timing of this ban, combined with the rhetoric from the top, that really added fuel to the fire, didn't it?
It certainly did. Adding insult to injury, the then Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, he publicly mocked the Gen V protesters. This was just a day before the protests really kicked off.
Mocked them? How?
He dismissed them as naive, wet behind the ears, easily led. He implied their concerns were trivial, uninformed, this dismissive, almost contemptuous attitude from the nation's leader. It just intensified the anger, that sense of being completely unheard. And what's fascinating, really, is the sheer speed of the political fallout from that. Within 48 hours of that public mockery, a clear miscalculation of the public mood, he was out of office.
Wow, 48 hours.
It just underscores how disconnected the political elite had become from the pulse of the nation's youth.
Okay, and that brings us directly to September 8th, the day this digital anger, this simmering frustration finally spilled out from the screens into physical space, into the streets.
Yes. On September 8th, that's when the initial crucial and, importantly, largely peaceful protest took place. A truly massive student-led crowd. Estimates put it around 20,000 people. They gathered at Medikar Mandala in Kathmandu.
Medikar Mandala, that's a historic spot for protests, isn't it? A real symbol.
It absolutely is. For many in our diaspora audience, it's a familiar focal point for public assembly, right in the heart of Kathmandu's civic life. And it's quite poignant, actually, that many students attended in their school uniforms. They seemed to believe, maybe somewhat innocently, that it would offer them some kind of protection from police action.
And these weren't just in Kathmandu.
No, importantly, these protests weren't confined to the capital. Similar demonstrations, maybe smaller in scale, they materialized across the country. It showed the nationwide reach of this feeling.
I remember the source material mentioned the nonprofit Hami Nepal played a role in this early stage.
Yes, the nonprofit Hami Nepal. They played a visible role in organizing this initial rally. They strongly emphasized nonviolence as their core principle, acting as a sort of public face for the movement. Now, it's worth noting, and this detail becomes significant later when we touch on those broader theories about influence, that their own website reportedly lists sponsors like Coca-Cola, U.S. corporations, and partners like U.S. National Endowment for Democracy or NED-funded anti-China organizations.
Okay, that's an interesting detail.
It is. It spurred questions later about foreign influence. But at this initial stage, on September 8th, Hami Nepal was primarily seen as an organizer for a deeply frustrated generation.
And what was the atmosphere like at that first gathering before things took a dark turn?
The initial mood, from descriptions, was almost festive, almost celebratory, even with the underlying discontent. There was music playing, enthusiastic chanting, a real visible sense of collective empowerment as young people were finally making their voices heard together. And there was a fascinating detail from that day. Some protesters were seen waving the Straw Hat Pirates' Jolly Rogers flag.
From the anime, One Piece.
Exactly. From the hugely popular Japanese anime series. For many young people globally, this isn't just a cartoon symbol. It represents, an aspirational quest for freedom, a challenge to corrupt authority, loyalty among your chosen group.
And it's been seen elsewhere.
Yes. Its appearance here echoed its use in other youth protests, like in Indonesia in 2025. It signifies this deeper shared cultural vocabulary of rebellion and hope among youth. But this collective expression, this almost celebratory gathering, it was tragically about to take a turn. It spiraled into something far more violent and destructive than anyone could have really imagined at the start.
Right. Here's where it gets, as you say, incredibly tragic. The peaceful demonstrations on September 8th quickly spiraled. What happened next on that fateful day?
The situation in Kathmandu on September 8th, it took that awful, tragic turn. As the demonstration went on, a segment of the protesters, maybe emboldened by their numbers, maybe frustrated by the lack of immediate government response or any clear dialogue, they attempted to enter the federal parliament building in New Baneswar. They broke through police barricades. They crossed a line that had previously held.
And that's when the response changed.
That's exactly when the state's response became utterly devastating. Security forces reacted with what eyewitnesses, international observers like Human Rights Watch, widely condemned as disproportionate and lethal force. They deployed expired tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, and critically, according to numerous accounts, live ammunition.
Live ammunition against protesters.
Yes. This wasn't just crowd control anymore. It wasn't just an attempt to disperse. It escalated incredibly quickly into, well, a massacre. At least 19 young protesters died on that first day alone. And deaths were reported not just in Kathmandu, but also in Itahari in the east.
19 dead on the first day. The human cost must have been immense. Do we have any sense of the personal impact, the stories that came out of that chaos?
We do, and what stands out are the raw accounts from survivors. They paint such a visceral picture. There was Saurav, an 18-year-old college student. He vividly described seeing a protester directly in front of him, shot in the chest, dying right there on the spot. He himself got hit with pellets in his hand. Another young man, Sulav Raj Shrestha, a promising civil engineering student, he was also among those killed. His life just tragically cut short.
Just devastating stories.
Absolutely. And the aftermath was grim. Hospitals across the city were overwhelmed, quickly filled with people suffering from bullet wounds, legs, arms, heads. Urgent calls for blood donations went out everywhere. And disturbingly, there were even reports, allegations, that police stormed hospitals and attacked the injured.
Attacked the injured in hospital.
That was the allegation. A shocking move, if true, that would only further inflame public outrage and completely erode any remaining trust in state institutions. This egregious act of state violence drew immediate, widespread international condemnation. Organizations like the UN Human Rights Office spoke out strongly. The public outcry led to the swift resignation of Home Minister Ramesh Lakak. The Kathmandu District Administration Office, the CDO Chabi Rijal, and Home Minister Lakak were widely held morally responsible for these brutal deaths. It was a day that just irreversibly changed the trajectory of everything.
So the outrage over those initial killings then fueled this terrifying descent into even greater chaos on September 9th. It sounds like it transformed from a protest into something more like a nationwide rebellion.
That's right. September 9th saw the collapse of the movement's initial discipline, those calls for nonviolence. It just dissolved into widespread, uncontrolled chaos across the entire country. Now, it's crucial for you, for our listeners, to understand this point clearly. While the initial anger and grievances were absolutely legitimate, deeply felt, politically motivated actors and, frankly, opportunistic elements were widely blamed for hijacking the protests. They were blamed for instigating destruction on a massive scale. The focus shifted dramatically from peaceful demands to just an outpouring of destructive rage.
So you're saying it wasn't just the original protesters causing the destruction?
That's the strong narrative that emerged. We had to unequivocally condemn the violence and destruction that occurred. But the attribution largely points to a loss of control by the original organizers and the infiltration of these opportunistic elements. Public rage, now just white-hot after the previous day's killings, was directed squarely at prominent political figures and their symbols.
What were the main targets of this fury? It sounds like it became a systematic attack on the establishment itself, going way beyond just individual grievances.
It truly was. A systematic dismantling of symbols of power, a collective lashing out against the entire perceived corrupt system. We saw physical attacks on senior leaders and their properties. Former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deba and his wife, Foreign Minister Arzurana Deba, they were injured, their house set on fire, a horrifying display. Deputy Prime Minister Prakash Man Singh's house and vehicle set ablaze. Even the residences of former President Bidya Devi Pandari and former PM Guhala Nath Kanal were torched.
So targeting individuals, but also the parties.
Yes, in a deeply symbolic assault on the entire political system, the central party headquarters of the three largest parties, The Nepali Congress, NCC, the CPN-UML, and the CPN Maoist Center, all three were set on fire and destroyed. Their party flags, potent symbols of their authority, were stripped down and burned in the streets, a powerful visual statement of cold rejection by the populace.
Wow. So not just individual politicians, but the very pillars of the state, the parties that govern, they were targeted as if the whole institutional framework was deemed illegitimate.
Precisely. The very pillars of the state were systematically targeted in this wave of arson and destruction. In Kathmandu, arsonists set fire to the federal parliament building itself. The Supreme Court, a critical institution for justice, was attacked, and the Singha Durbar administrative hub.
Singha Durbar, that houses so many ministries, right? The Prime Minister's office.
Exactly. And what's particularly heartbreaking, a real reopened wound for many Nepalese, is that Singha Durbar's historic west facade, which had been recently restored with such national pride after the devastating 2015 earthquake, was engulfed in flames again.
Oh no, all that restoration work.
Gone. And this wasn't just physical damage. It was a profound blow to national heritage, to institutional memory. Countless government records, irreplaceable documents, just lost in the fires. This loss doesn't just halt government functions, it erodes the very foundations of statecraft and justice. And this pattern of destruction, it was mirrored elsewhere across the country. Provincial assembly buildings in places like Pokhara, in Gandaki province and Karnali province. Other critical government offices, nationwide district administration offices, district courts, Pokhara metropolitan city offices, the road department, even the Commission for the Investigation of Abuse of Authority, the CIAA.
Even the anti-corruption body.
Even the anti-corruption body. The message was stark. No institution was safe from the public's wrath.
And the economic impact must have been immediate, severe. Businesses were targeted too, suggesting the public's fury extended to that perceived corrupt link between politics and big money.
Absolutely. The mob's fury expanded significantly into the corporate world. They meticulously targeted major business houses seen as part of that corrupt political business nexus, the ones perceived to have long profited from the system. The Chaudhary Group, CG, the country's largest multinational conglomerate, led by tycoon Binod Chaudhary, became a primary target. Its corporate headquarters, several prominent automobile showrooms, destroyed by arsonists.
CG is huge in Nepal.
Massive. And then the Pathapateni supermarket chain, which is everywhere, a ubiquitous retail giant. Multiple outlets across the country were systematically looted and then set ablaze. The hotel and tourism sector, absolutely vital to Nepal's economy, just starting to recover. It faced a devastating assault. Around 24 hotels damaged nationwide, including the new Hilton Hotel in Kathmandu.
And the cost.
Estimated losses for that sector alone exceeded Rs $25 billion. That's about $188 million USD. A catastrophic blow happening tragically right at the peak of the autumn tourism season.
Just terrible timing.
Awful timing. And other key sectors were hit too. The headquarters of Kantipur Publications, Nepal's largest media house, was set on fire, taking its online news portal offline. CG Electronics Digital Park was targeted too. It shows the broad reach of the destruction.
This sounds like a complete breakdown of public order, far beyond just protests against buildings. Was there a broader security crisis beyond the destruction?
This raises a really important question about the state's capacity to maintain order. And the answer, tragically, is yes. A major security crisis unfolded with mass prison breaks across the country.
Prison breaks, how many?
Prisons were stormed. It led to the astonishing escape of over 12,500 inmates.
12,500.
Yes. We saw examples like Kalali District Prison, Nakhu Jail in Kathmandu, where even Rabi Lamachane, a prominent media figure and politician, was freed. Kaleski Prison saw 773 inmates escape. This created an immediate nationwide security threat. Thousands of potentially dangerous individuals now at large. Tragically, 5 inmates were even killed during a jailbreak at a juvenile correctional facility in Banka District. It highlights the lethality, the desperation characterizing the chaos. This situation alone created an atmosphere of fear and instability that just profoundly impacted public safety and trust.
How did the authorities finally respond to this unprecedented level of unrest? Did the military have to step in?
With the state's institutions under widespread attack, civilian police clearly overwhelmed, outmatched. Yes, the Nepali army began to assume command of security on the evening of September 9th. They enforced a nationwide curfew, a measure that starkly underscored the severity of the situation, the government's loss of control. Army Chief Ashok Raj Sigdel played a crucial mediating role. He issued public appeals to the agitating groups for talks, deploring the violence. Troops were rapidly deployed. By the morning of September 10th, they were patrolling critical areas, trying to restore public order.
Did they manage to apprehend people involved in the destruction?
The Army later announced detaining 27 individuals specifically for destructive and anarchic activities, and they recovered a substantial cache of weapons, 268 firearms, including various rifles, even a 9mm pistol. This clearly indicated the presence of armed elements within the chaos.
Then the final human cost.
By the end of the week, the official death toll from the unrest had tragically risen to 51. Yes, a stark number. It included 21 protesters, 9 prisoners killed in the jailbreaks, 3 police officers, and 18 others, including an Indian woman caught in the crossfire. And over 1,771 people were treated for injuries across 52 hospitals. Just a grim picture of the week's human cost.
This level of widespread destruction, especially the systematic targeting of state institutions and those visual symbols like the one-piece flag, it gave rise to a very specific and certainly contentious interpretation, didn't it? It raised profound questions. Was this purely an organic outpouring of rage? Or, as a theory gaining traction in certain circles suggests, was there something else at play, hinting at external influence? This is where the color revolution theory comes into focus. Tell us about that.
Yes, this is where things get complex and interpretations diverge sharply. This perspective posits that the protests weren't entirely spontaneous, but rather a U.S.-engineered color revolution designed specifically to destabilize Nepal. What's fascinating here is how proponents of this theory piece together various elements as alleged evidence. They argue the sheer scale and coordination of the destruction, plus certain symbols, point to a more organized, externally backed agenda.
Okay, so what exactly did they point to as proof for this theory? What were the key pieces of alleged evidence?
Well, they pointed to several things. First, the funding of Hami Nepal, the group visible in organizing the initial protests. As we mentioned, their own website reportedly lists U.S. corporations like Coca-Cola as sponsors and NED-funded anti-China organizations as partners. Proponents argue this connection is a key indicator of potential foreign influence.
Right, the NED connection.
Second, the role of the NED itself is highlighted. The theory suggests the NED, which has publicly acknowledged funding youth movements and what its critics call sedition worldwide, including programs in Nepal, played a direct role. The fact that the NED no longer discloses the names of organizations it funds, citing protection, is seen as suspicious by these theorists. It implies a hidden hand operating beneath the surface.
And what about the traditional human rights watchdogs? Were they also drawn into this theory?
Yes, this raises an important point within the theory. Organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, which receive funding from Western governments and corporate foundations, they're accused by proponents of this theory of providing, quote, lopsided coverage.
Lopsided how?
Proponents argue these groups focused heavily on police brutality while allegedly ignoring reports or videos that circulated showing some protesters armed with weapons. They claim it painted an incomplete picture, selectively highlighting narratives that fit a particular anti-state agenda.
Okay. Any other points?
Another piece often cited is a 2023 visit by U.S. Undersecretary Victoria Nuland to Nepal. The implication here, often delivered with a conspiratorial tone, is, wherever this woman goes, watch out. Suggesting she's a harbinger of U.S.-backed destabilization efforts, her presence signaling impending geopolitical moves.
So the core argument of this theory is a geopolitical motive. What would the U.S. supposedly gain from destabilizing a landlocked country like Nepal, sitting between India and China?
Right. Zooming out for a moment, the theory suggests the U.S. interest in Nepal isn't about Nepal itself, despite its location. It's about maintaining global primacy by creating instability in strategic regions. Specifically, Nepal's destabilization is seen as targeting China and India. Nepal's location between these two giants is key. And China's ambitious plans to connect Nepal by rail, a major part of the Belt and Road Initiative that would physically and economically bind Nepal closer to China, are cited as the primary motivation for the U.S. The argument is that the U.S. wants to destabilize Nepal to prevent such binding infrastructure, to stop Nepal from moving closer to China. A functional, stable Nepal, cooperating closely with its neighbors, especially China, is seen as undermining U.S. global hegemony and its broader Indo-Pacific strategy.
Okay, so a very complex and, frankly, quite disturbing theory. But it's important for our listeners, as you said, to understand where this perspective comes from and how different narratives can emerge around the same events.
Indeed. And we must stress again, while this theory circulates in some Western alternative media circles and analyses, we are impartially reporting on the content provided. We are not endorsing these viewpoints. It remains a conspiracy theory in many circles, lacking definitive widespread proof. We simply present it because it emerged amidst the chaos. It raises that open question. To what extent can genuine domestic grievances be amplified or perhaps exploited by external actors? It asks you, the listener, to consider how different narratives can form around the same events and to critically evaluate the sources and arguments being presented.
Absolutely. Okay, so with the nation engulfed in chaos, significant loss of life, a power vacuum inevitably emerged. What happened to the existing government structure in the immediate aftermath of all that destruction?
Well, the escalating crisis just made the previous government under KP Sharma Oli utterly untenable. Facing immense public anger, completely unable to quell the protests that had spiraled so violently out of control, he resigned on September 9th. He did so, technically, in accordance with Article 762 of the Constitution. For our listeners, that specifies conditions for a prime minister stepping down, typically after losing confidence, paving the way for a new government.
So he followed the constitutional process, but under duress.
Exactly. It was a stark image, a leader effectively abandoning his post amidst the turmoil. There were reports he fled to an army barracks in Shivapuri for safety. With the government in disarray, the Nepali army significantly stepped up its role. They were effectively controlling the streets by September 10th. General Ashok Raj Sigdel, the army chief, played a crucial mediating role then, enforcing those nationwide curfews, appealing publicly for calm and dialogue from the agitating groups. President Ramchandra Paudel also urged restraint and dialogue, trying desperately to stabilize a volatile situation, prevent further bloodshed.
So a period of immense uncertainty then. The traditional political structures struggling to respond. What was the constitutional path forward, and how did it play out in this, well, unique crisis?
Well, what's fascinating is the initial standoff, the profound constitutional dilemma. Constitutionally, yes, the president should have called upon the political parties to try and form a new government. But this process was incredibly complicated. You had the sheer extent of the destruction and the unprecedented demands of the Gen Z movement. They went far beyond traditional political horse trading.
They wanted fundamental change, not just a new coalition.
Precisely. Their calls for systemic change, for real accountability, made a simple coalition deal almost impossible. Things were so fragile, there were even potent rumors circulating that the military was preparing a coup. The Nepali army actually had to publicly deny this, which just underscores the extreme uncertainty of that moment. The nation felt adrift, a power vacuum, and a desperate need for some kind of unifying figure.
And how did this eventually lead to the appointment of a new interim leader, a figure who seems to have emerged as a sort of consensus choice from the ashes?
The path to that interim solution involved intense, really high-stakes negotiations, a true political tightrope walk. These discussions took place between President Paudel, Army Chief Sigdel, representatives of the Gen Z movement, including figures like Sudan Gurung from Hami, Nepal, and the leaders of the major political parties. Finally, on September 12th, a breakthrough deal was announced. Former Chief Justice Sushila Karki was appointed interim prime minister.
Sushila Karki, a big name.
A very big name. And she was given a clear, crucial mandate: hold elections for the House of Representatives within 6 months. Specifically by March 5, 2026. This appointment also made her Nepal's first female leader, a truly historic moment amidst all the chaos, and a significant symbol of potential progress.
Karki's appointment seems like it was a really significant moment, especially for the youth movement. What made her the consensus candidate, especially given all that anger against corruption and the establishment?
Karki was a consensus candidate for many, precisely because of her stellar, almost unimpeachable reputation. She has this strong record of integrity, a well-known zero-tolerance stance on corruption. That resonated deeply with the core demands of the Gen Z movement.
Can you remind us of her background?
Sure. Her background really speaks volumes. She served as Nepal's first female Chief Justice from July 2016 to June 2017. She was known for her, quote, frugal ways, avoiding those ostentatious displays of wealth that fueled the hashtag #NepoBaby anger, and for being a, quote, firebrand judge unafraid to ruffle powerful feathers within the political elite.
Any specific examples?
Yes, her notable actions include convicting a sitting minister of corruption back in 2012, demonstrating her fearlessness. She also ruled against granting amnesty for a convicted murderer, upholding the rule of law even for politically connected individuals. And remember, an impeachment motion was brought against her in 2017, widely seen as politically motivated to silence her. It was withdrawn only due to immense public pressure, which further solidified her image as independent and incorruptible.
And she had a history of activism, too.
She did. She had actually been jailed for participating in the 1990 People's Movement for Democracy. That gave her unique credibility as someone who understood the power of public protest herself.
So her track record clearly aligned with the anti-corruption demands. Was there a specific key demand from the youth delegates that really cemented this deal? Maybe one that went against what the established parties wanted?
Yes, there was. A crucial part of the deal, one insisted upon by the youth delegates, was the dissolution of the current parliament before Karki's appointment.
Dissolving parliament entirely.
Entirely. This was a non-negotiable bottom line for them. It showed their profound lack of trust in the established political parties, their desire for a complete reset, not just a reshuffle. President Paudel eventually agreed to this. Reports suggest it was under mounting pressure, including a military warning of a potential state of emergency if an agreement wasn't reached quickly. This move, while fulfilling that key youth demand, temporarily left the country without any elected representatives, vesting leadership solely in the interim government. It highlights just how extraordinary the circumstances were.
Okay, so a seemingly positive outcome, addressing a key demand of the youth. But such a dramatic shift, especially dissolving parliament, that wouldn't have been universally welcomed by the political class, right?
Absolutely not. While Karki's appointment was widely seen as a victory for youth power, a symbol of their ability to force real change, it was met with significant dissatisfaction from the established political parties. The Nepali Congress, NC, the CPN-UML, the CPN-Maoist Center, all three expressed strong disapproval of dissolving parliament and Karki's appointment. They argued it went against the constitutional framework, that it set a dangerous precedent outside normal democratic processes. Essentially, they saw it as an unconstitutional move forced by mob rule and military pressure.
And this discontent wasn't just, statements. It was made visually apparent at a very public event, wasn't it?
Yes, and what's fascinating is how symbolic absences speak volumes in Nepali politics. This discontent was made powerfully evident by the notable absence of key political figures from Karki's oath-taking ceremony at Sheetal Niwas, the presidential palace.
Who wasn't there?
The list is telling. The outgoing Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli wasn't there. The Speaker of the House, the Chairperson of the National Assembly, numerous former prime ministers, leaders of all the major political parties, they stayed away.
Even Mayor Balan Shah. He was seen as supportive of the youth movement.
Exactly. Even Kathmandu Mayor Balan Shah, a prominent independent figure, quite vocal in supporting the Gen Z movement initially, did not attend. His absence was particularly telling. It signaled broader political tensions, a contested mandate for this new interim arrangement. It suggested that even those who championed reform were perhaps wary of the process that led to it.
What about the international community? How did Nepal's big neighbors and global players react to these incredibly rapid developments, given Nepal's strategic spot?
International reactions were, as you'd expect, a mix, carefully calibrated. Nepal's geopolitical importance means everyone watches closely. India moved quickly. They welcomed the formation of the interim government. Prime Minister Narendra Modi personally congratulated Karki, pledged support for peace and stability.
That's significant, India's endorsement.
Very significant, signaling their acceptance of the new arrangement. China, on the other hand, while they had urged calm during the protests, called for the protection of their citizens and property. They had not yet officially reacted to the new prime minister by September 13th.
Interesting.
It raises an important question, doesn't it? How will these regional powers navigate the new political landscape, especially given those color revolution theory claims about their strategic interests? Their reactions, or lack thereof, will definitely shape the diplomatic and economic path forward for Nepal.
Okay. This has been just a whirlwind week for Nepal, a true trial by fire, as you said. Looking beyond the immediate events now, what does the road ahead look like? Is there cause for optimism amidst such immense challenges, such widespread destruction?
Well, the interim government, led now by Sushila Karki, this figure of, as we've discussed, unimpeachable integrity, they face a truly monumental task. Monumental. While the challenges are immense, there is, I think, a cautious optimism in the air. But first, the challenges. The damage from the past week is profound. Nepal has to confront several immediate crises head-on. First, just restoring order and rebuilding. That's going to be a Herculean effort. Chief Secretary Eknarayan Aryal described the damage as massive and irreparable. Think about it. Burned government buildings like Singh Durbar, the Supreme Court, countless legal files, administrative records just gone, private businesses across the country ruined, firefighters battled those blazes for days. The destruction of documents, of institutional memory is just immeasurable.
That loss of records must cripple basic functions.
It absolutely does. It doesn't just halt government operations. It erodes the very foundations of statecraft, of justice. Rebuilding will demand enormous financial investment, yes, but also a concerted national effort. Maybe digitizing, securing, decentralizing critical information to prevent future catastrophic losses like this. Cleanup operations have begun, but physical and institutional reconstruction. That will take considerable time, huge resources, and a unified national effort that has to transcend political divides.
And beyond the physical rebuilding, those mass prison breaks must pose a significant ongoing security threat nationwide.
Absolutely. Security concerns remain paramount. Over 12,500 prisoners still at large. That's a nationwide security threat, a serious challenge to public safety, to law enforcement. The Nepali army continues its extensive efforts to track and reapprehend them. They've recovered hundreds of looted weapons already, but it's a huge task. This situation alone creates an atmosphere of fear, of instability, that has to be addressed decisively for any semblance of normalcy, any public trust to return. These individuals are dispersed, potentially armed. It's complex.
And the economic fallout, especially hitting tourism so hard, that must be severe, with long-lasting consequences for an already struggling economy.
The economic blow is indeed severe. The Hotel Association Nepal reported over Rs 25 billion in losses just for the tourism sector. An industry vital for foreign currency, for jobs, just starting to recover, hit right at peak season.
All those cancellations.
Mass cancellations. Huge loss of revenue for countless businesses, individuals. Furthermore, international trade basically stopped due to border closures, airport shutdowns. This threatened shortages of essential goods right before major festivals like Dissent and TR. That just compounds the economic hardship felt by so many Nepalese, particularly the youth facing that endemic unemployment we talked about. Rebuilding investor confidence, rebuilding the tourism sector, that's going to be a long, arduous process.
Okay, so huge, immediate challenges on multiple fronts: rebuilding, security, the economy. And politically, Karki's interim government faces an uphill battle to achieve stability, prepare for elections in just 6 months, especially with the established parties so unhappy.
That's right. Political instability is still a significant hurdle. Karki's government is interim, remember, tasked specifically with holding elections by March 5, 2026. Just forming a stable cabinet from disparate groups, maybe technocrats, maybe Gen Z representatives, maybe some political figures willing to join that alone, is tough. And navigating the deep discontent of the established parties who oppose her appointment, oppose dissolving parliament, that will require immense skill, really delicate political maneuvering. She'll need to build bridges, restore trust, somehow demonstrate effective governance in this deeply polarized environment. This isn't just about managing logistics for an election. It's about trying to fundamentally reform a political culture that's been so widely criticized for corruption and inefficiency. Despite all these formidable challenges, you mentioned cautious optimism. What's the positive potential here? What's the silver lining, if any, in this incredibly tumultuous week for Nepal? Well, if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, the violence, the destruction, and let's be clear, it was reprehensible, tragic. It cannot erase the legitimacy of that generation's initial call, the call for accountability, for an end to corruption. This was a generation that, as their banners often declared, said, enough is enough. They refused to accept the status quo of nepotism, of misgovernance, that explosive energy that successfully toppled a government, the sheer power demonstrated by this youth movement that can now be channeled into the patient, disciplined, constructive work of building something new. The initial anti-corruption movement reflected deep, legitimate grievances. That fundamental desire for a more just, more accountable nation, that remains. It's a potent force that can be harnessed for positive change.
So this isn't just about cleaning up the mess, but maybe about building something new and better, a genuine chance for a new political culture.
Exactly. That's the hope, isn't it? The Gen Z movement, despite its internal divisions, despite the challenges of infiltration by those opportunistic elements, it demonstrated the profound power of youth to bring about change, to demand reform. Their resolve, their willingness to lead from the front, articulated by figures like Anil Bania of Hami Nepal. That's a potent force that could redefine Nepal's future. The task now is to harness that energy, to translate righteous anger into constructive action, to move beyond catharsis towards structured, thoughtful reform. A genuinely new political culture would mean greater transparency, real accountability, institutions that truly serve the people, not just a select elite. It means breaking the cycle of corruption and protest, moving towards one of progress and participation.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for Nepal, for our listeners, for the future?
For Nepal, I think the ashes of September 2025 represent both a tragic end, an end to an era of perceived impunity, perhaps, and a perilous yet hopeful beginning. The week proved that the will of the people, especially a mobilized younger generation, remains the ultimate authority. It's capable of overturning even entrenched power. However, it also starkly highlighted the fragility of institutions when confronted with uncontrolled rage, and the dangers of opportunistic elements hijacking legitimate grievances for destructive ends. The key question now, the one everyone is asking, is whether this was merely a moment of cathartic destruction, a burst of anger that maybe ultimately undermined its own cause, the sheer scale of the chaos, or if this new generation can unify, can plan, can guide the country towards a future defined not by mob violence, but by collective wisdom, by structured reform, by the rule of law. It's a trial by fire, truly, and Nepal hopes to rise stronger from it, forging a genuinely new and hopefully more accountable political culture.
That was a truly in-depth look at the week that reshaped a nation, a crucial deep dive into those events of September 8, 2025, and their lasting impact on Nepal. The insights from this week really underscore the immense power of a generation refusing to accept the status quo, even as, well, the path forward remains incredibly complex and challenging.
Indeed it does. The events serve as such a stark reminder of how quickly public frustration can escalate, and the critical importance of effective, transparent governance. The appointment of an interim leader known for integrity, like Sushila Karki, it does offer a glimmer of hope. But the real work, the healing, the rebuilding, fostering genuine democratic reform, that's really just beginning for Nepal.
And it leaves us with this final thought to mull over, perhaps. For the Nepalese people, was this tumultuous week a cathartic burst of anger that ultimately undermined its own cause? Or was it the necessary, albeit incredibly painful, dawn of a lasting reform movement driven by a new generation? The answer truly lies in what happens next. We encourage you to visit nepalidiaspora.net for the full in-depth report, the latest updates, and comprehensive resources for Nepalese worldwide. Thank you for joining us on the Nepali Diaspora Network for this deep dive.